Well, I can't rightly call this an introduction video. I apologize for getting this up so late. It was a hectic spring break, and, well, it takes me a couple hours to do these 10 minutes. But nonetheless, I think we could have some useful and worthwhile information in these videos. Really what I want to do is underscore a couple key themes that run throughout all your reading assignment for this unit. But not only that, also give you some sense of where this period of time, the Civil War and Reconstruction period in Appalachia, fits into the region's larger machinery, the larger history of the region. But not only that, also underscore and reemphasize the fact that we're working on this postmodern regionalism this semester. And that is how the region can be defined by key interactions between people and place, and how these interactions change over time. Really, the place to start to fully appreciate the Civil War in Appalachia is to, well, do a refresher and recall where the region was in 1860. Recall that the first unit was all about the ways in which diverse people met and influenced one another in the Appalachian frontier, how whites came to dominate that interaction and came to dominate the region, and finally how by 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, they had adapted their society, their economy to the particular environment and the particular circumstances of the Appalachian region. Recall that, isolation isn't the best word to describe them in 1860. Rather, they had unreliable access to unreliable markets, but whenever they could access those markets, they would, through ginseng, through gathering of other forest products, through the cattle industry. So if that's the way we define that first historic period, how then do we define this second historic period in Appalachian history that we're working on this semester? That is the Civil War and Reconstruction. Three things to keep in mind. Three interactions that I would suggest define the region during this period. Number one of which is the fact that the Civil War really brought a political definition of Appalachia to bear upon the politics of the region, the society of the region, and the economy of the region. So yeah, this first part of the definition is all about the ways in which the Civil War defined the region politically. And there's a number of different examples we can point to as far as political definitions that emerged during the Civil War period. Chief among them, of course, is the creation of West Virginia in 1863. West Virginia was the only major territorial adjustment made during the course of the war. And, of course, the boundaries of West Virginia fall entirely within the Appalachian region. And as you go through your reading, see, too, that the eastern Tennessee also became perceived as a political unit within Tennessee during the course of the Civil War. Secondly, the fact that the Civil War cast what the historian Gordon McKinney and the historian John Alexander Williams would call a long shadow over the region. This is an interesting term, and what they try to convey with the language of the term is the fact that despite Appalachia not being the central focus of Civil War battles, military engagements nonetheless had a profound impact upon the region and its people. Let me explain it to you this way. There really wasn't any major decisive battles fought in Appalachia during the course of the Civil War. And indeed, much of the warfare of the Civil War happened on the eastern and western outskirts of the region. Go to any map of military engagements in the Civil War, and you'll see that much of the battles were focused in and around the Shenandoah Valley in the east, which is really the eastern periphery of Appalachia. Some parts of it you could actually consider Appalachia. Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, for example, could be considered Appalachian. not only in the east, but also on the western periphery of Appalachia, areas in and around Knoxville, and of course all up and down the Mississippi River, are just at the western periphery of Appalachia. Now, we did have many battles in Appalachia, and indeed, some of these battles are reenacted faithfully every year. I'm recording this video, of course, from Philippi, site of the first land battle of the Civil War, which is faithfully reenacted June of every year at the Blue and Gray Reunion. Most of the battles that actually were fought in Appalachia, truthfully, were skirmishes. Some of them more important, indeed. The Battle of Droop Mountain in Pocahontas County, I would say, is a pretty important battle. But nonetheless, most of the battles that were fought in Appalachia were more raids and skirmishes. Nonetheless, the war and the military engagements of the war had a profound impact upon the people. And that's what we mean by long shadow. John Alexander Williams calls it both a hidden war and a dual war that was actually fought in Appalachia. And what he means by that is this: the war was fought mainly within communities and between communities. It was a war fought not by men marching in organized regiments, but by neighbors, by men who wore no uniforms. Not only that, also the idea of the long shadow of the war suggests the fraying of Appalachian communities. And indeed, a couple of our readings, and I'll introduce those readings in a separate video, really deal with the impact the Civil War had, the politics of the Civil War had, on very local communities. Third thing, and third key relationship that defined the region during this period is, of course, the aftermath of the Civil War. The long shadow indeed includes this idea that the Civil War had a life beyond the surrendering or the Confederacy at Appomattox in 1865, and that it was, really the Civil War in Appalachia resonated throughout the rest of the 1860s and into the 1870s. The period of history right after the Civil War and all the way up to 1877 is called in American history textbooks Reconstruction. Reconstruction with a capital R. Well, Reconstruction in Appalachia had a very particular feeling to it, and was different from the South. Because Appalachia was a borderland, issues of what to do with large populations of concentrated free slaves wasn't as pressing as it was in, say, Alabama, where there are dozens of counties where the majority of people were freedmen. But nonetheless, slavery became an important question during this Reconstruction period. Not only that, also during this Reconstruction period, we have to grapple with the fact that many Appalachians were Confederate soldiers. Take West Virginia, for example. Hold on a second. Let me... Okay. Sorry for that interruption, recording this from my office, but I'll press ahead. In West Virginia, for example, estimates range that there are perhaps 20,000 men fought for the Confederacy during the course of the Civil War. And, of course, many of them came home to a brand new state that was formed largely by Unionists, by Republicans, a state that they had no part in creating. So they returned home to this new state. How did they relate to this new state? And how did it change the politics? All these are issues that are taken up in your readings. But also, it goes to show you that really the importance of the Civil War lasted beyond 1865. And really what Appalachia had this particular Reconstruction experience that we must include in understanding the full impact of the Civil War in Appalachia. Okay, under our next video, I'll introduce a couple of the readings and underscore a couple key themes and ideas that you'll need to prep for our quiz.